some thoughts for you on that, and then we'll see you back here tomorrow night for On Balance. Here's Chris.
I'm Chris Cuomo. We have a few days before the NBA Finals begin, so we have to get after it. And by it, I mean the real game, the one that's going on in Washington, D.C. Lawfare is all around us. Yes, that includes the New York case against the former president, in my opinion. But there's no high ground to be had. We see another case against Biden's son. That is, again, not exactly a common case you'll see brought, especially by the feds. And then you have today's biggest example of going after someone for bad reason. And that is the congressional hearing with Dr. Anthony Fauci. Now, look, there are real questions, real concerns that demand answers about pandemic-era policies. But we did not get anything but noise today. Here is the metaphor for the level of exchange.
Do you think that's appropriate? Do the American people deserve to be abused like that, Mr. Fauci? Because you're not doctor, you're Mr. Fauci in my few minutes.
Are we allowed to deny that a doctor is a doctor just because we don't want him to be a doctor?
Yes, because in my time, that man does not deserve to have a license. As a matter of fact, it should be revoked, and he belongs in prison.
Suspend.
That's what we're about now? This is what passes for the standard of who should be representing a community? So what we did here is I made a list of allegations with the basis or lack thereof, okay? First one was that Fauci deleted official records. All right, now there's a whole basket of allegations that come from this hearing they had with this guy, Dr. Morenz, who works with Fauci. He's not his main aide. He's not like the echo of Fauci. And he said a lot of weird things. Hold that. A lot of weird things that need to be explained. But they weren't Fauci's emails. So they had emails from this aide. And in some of the emails, it suggests that Tony was a part of conversations this guy was having. But there's no proof that he was part of the conversations. And even if he were, there's no proof that the conversations were wrong. But they just threw it at Tony. Why? Because he's the target. Then there was the follow. Oh, and you used personal email because you didn't want people seeing what you were doing. Fauci says, no, I didn't. I don't have any recollection of ever using personal email. Do they have personal emails of Fauci? No. What do they have? Morenz talking about using his personal email, so they just throw the allegation at him. Is that really what this is about? Again, even if he did use his personal email, I know that that violates policy. But this was also a constant criticism of the Trump administration. And the same folks who are all in high dudgeon now, they weren't then. Why? Because it's all about gotcha of proving the other side is worse. This is the game. They went after Fauci saying, you established a secret back channel. Again, this Morenz guy is the guy who was saying it. He didn't say Fauci made a back channel. Why isn't Morenz the guy back in the chair? Ask him if Fauci was part of all these things. At least then you'd have a basis for the questions. They just kept laying it on Fauci because they want him to look like the bad guy. And that's fine if you can prove that he is. Fauci says, I have no clue. And again, no basis for the question. Well, this guy Morenz said he was trying to do that. Okay, then your problem's with him. And you would see it in the silences. So they asked the question, Fauci would be like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's not me. And then their head would go down. They'd start looking for the next gotcha, as you could almost feel someone on their staff cutting it and putting it out on social media as owning Fauci. Unprepared, unsubstantiated. Then we got into a couple of real things. The 6-foot distancing rule. A lot of people are pissed about that. They want to know where it came from. The headlines blasted. Anthony Fauci says it didn't work. Did he say that? No. He didn't say that. Well, but the headlines say he did. Yeah, I know. They're wrong. So then they go after Fauci, and it seems like he doesn't even know about the 6-foot rule. And they play it like that means Fauci's clueless, like how they attack Biden. But Fauci ain't Biden. Fauci doesn't know because it wasn't his rule. It came from the CDC. Silence. Then we had the big enchilada. Fauci's on the take. And there's proof $700 million in royalties paid to government scientists. What the what? They were on the take from the vaccine makers. That's why it was allowed to be rushed. That's why it was allowed to be unsafe. That's why they forced it on all of you. There was a payoff. The New York Post went with it, so it must be good, right? Zero proof. Fauci got nothing during the pandemic related to the COVID vaccine from the makers. And he makes like a couple of $100 a year from royalties from something he made 20 years ago. And that's when they flipped it in that clip that you saw from MTG of, saying, oh, Fauci was on the take to, hey, is it right that scientists get royalties, for things that they make and then companies are going to produce and sell? So now that's what you're going to talk to Fauci about, a rule that he didn't make? Then they say you pushed a false narrative that the COVID vaccine stops transmission. Now, this is a legitimate point of messaging that we need to get into because there was something deceptive about the messaging, but it didn't come from Tony Fauci. It was more the political messaging. Tony Fauci says, no, the vaccine's protection is durable, not its ability to prevent transmission. Now, what does that mean? Hold on. What does that mean? It means that he's a scientist and sometimes he talks over your head. It doesn't mean he's being sneaky. Durable means what? Well, that even with time, the vaccine still gives you protection you wouldn't have without the vaccine. Okay. But it doesn't give you enough protection to not transmit it. That's true. And did it get suggested at the time that if you got the vaccine, you wouldn't be able to get anybody else sick? Yes. Was that true? Only-ish. And early on, and that became less and less true as we got through the variants. That's a legitimate question, but we didn't have a legitimate conversation about it. So, Fauci says it took time to discover it. How much time, why, who was watching, who decided it, none of that came up. And then they say, oh, and you were working with the intel community to push false narratives. Fauci said, yeah, they briefed me, not the other way around. What was the follow-up question? Why? Because, again, they were just throwing spaghetti at the wall. Now, here's another one that all of you will care about. You played down the lab leak theory, Tony Fauci. Tony Fauci denies this, but you know what? I think there was too much ignoring of this by all of them. And Fauci had that group that was put together. They came back and said, we think it was in the market, more likely than not. And Tony Fauci, all of them, could have pushed a lot more than they did. I think that's fair criticism. So could a Trump. So could the Congress right now, by not going after Tony Fauci, go after China, because that's who China made it. And even if you want to chase him about gain of function, did anything that they fund have a reasonable certainty of even becoming the COVID virus that made us sick? And the answer is no. And they've done no better than that yet. Again, I know you're curious, some of you. I know some of you are concerned. I know some of you are outraged by the pandemic policies. I get it. So let's get answers. You're not going to get them this way. Not just playing gotcha and having clowns like that MTG. And that's too bad because they're good people on that commission who want to do the job. And I have one of us tonight. Republican Congressman Rich McCormick, who's also a doctor. All right. And he representative from Georgia. He's on that subcommittee. He was one of the people asking questions today. And Dr. Robert Redfield, friend of show, ran the CDC, of course, in the beginning of the pandemic. And I use him as a kind of a hard stop on policies and what we need to do because he knows. Gentlemen, thank you. And again, Congressman, it's not like we went to school together or anything like that. But I believe that you are acting in good faith and you want to get answers. I don't think they're going to let you do it in this forum. There's just too much pressure to play. What's your take?
Well, if you look at the questions that I focused on, the things that I was really trying to gear at, if we're trying to get to the bottom of what these hearings are all about, what are the lessons learned? What I keep on saying is I just want to have an honest conversation. I do want to have a scientific conversation. I do want us to disagree and be allowed to disagree. That was my whole premise of the argument to begin with, is that you don't censor me an ER doctor who's seeing patients because you're the government. That's dangerous thinking, and that's what happened to me, individual. That's what I kept on pointing out. Look, I had my own theories. I thought it was an honest discussion. I thought I could actually bring up some points that I disputed and I'd be listened to. Instead, they censored me, kicked me off of Facebook, kicked me off of Twitter, and actually threatened my license because I disagree with the government. That's not the way it's supposed to work. And then furthermore, I also pointed out the government should never be so powerful that they set medical policies. This should be about you and your physician. Once the government sets, hey, this blanket rule is going to apply to everybody, or that they're going to eliminate your ability to travel or to be educated or to run a business, that's huge overreach by a government. And I never want to see any excuse by a government to spend $6 trillion or to ruin an economy or to ruin your business, take away your livelihood. I think that's not what America was based on. Now, I get it. There's risks, and we're all scared. And I think we should have a legitimate conversation about what's good for society, but they went way too far on this, and I think the biggest takeaway for me was that government should slow down and listen to physicians, let people talk to their physicians and make some individual choices, and some of them are scary. Some of them are risky, but that's what America was based on, is that we can take some risks because we're Americans and we're in control.
I think that's all fair, and I think that the meat of it is which policies, Dr. Redfield, were right at the time, wrong at the time, and why, and what to do about it. As a macro point, you were there and you knew the people who were involved after you left. Do you believe that there was any conspiracy afoot to trash the economy or force the vaccine on people for profit of the men and women involved of running the government agencies?
No. I don't believe that.
That's it, you're done. Now they're all going to hate you too, Doc. I'll save space for you at my house. No, make your point.
No, I want to just echo what the congressman said. I think obviously he's exactly right that there was overreach. I always argued that, you don't force people to do something like, let's just say, take a vaccine. Even though I'm a big advocate for the scientific value of vaccines, I think it's important for you to explain to people why you believe the vaccine's in their interest. And if they don't agree, then next time you see them, you try to make sure you can explain it again. If they have some misunderstanding, you try to correct those misunderstandings. But I do think it was a big mistake when you look at things that didn't work, was to go ahead and mandate vaccines. There obviously was a significant mistake in not giving any credibility to natural immunity from natural infection. We had, firefighters and military that had higher immunity to COVID from infection than they would get from a vaccine. But since they didn't take the vaccine, they lost their employment. Those things were overreach, and I think were big mistakes. I'm not an advocate of the shutdowns. I thought they were a mistake. I did advocate for the 15 days to slow the spread of COVID. I was in sort of the Vice President Pence camp that said it was like a sporting event. You take a knee for 15 days. During those 15 days, you figure out how you can continue those activities in a safe and responsible and effective way. It was a big mistake, I think, to go to the shutdowns of schools, shutdowns of business, shutdown of churches.
Right. I get your position. So the conversation has to be, the conversation you got to have is, well, let's go back and get the people who made the decisions, and let's look at the basis on why they did it then, what was right, what was wrong about it, what did we learn over time? Most importantly, when did you learn it, and did you adjust when you learned it? Now, we know the answer to that last one is no, and that's one of the boogeymen that should really be getting fleshed out. We're just not doing it. One quick thing for you, Bob, and then I want to come back to you, Congressman. Tony Fauci says, I don't know about the 6-foot rule. It came from the CDC. I went back and looked at the reporting. It did come out of the CDC. Was that when you were there, or was after? And did you have a problem with the 6-foot rule?
No, it would have come out of CDC when I was there. It was, generated obviously by some of the senior scientists at CDC that put that advice together. It was a matter of debate from me and others that there was not the data to say 6 feet was better than 3 feet. Some of us did argue that 3 feet had a much different impact on business and school, et cetera. I was very able to keep the schools open in the Baltimore area because the Baltimore community, the bishops and everything listened to my advice when I said I didn't think 6 feet was any data over 3 feet, and so they went with 3 feet and they kept their schools open. Those groups that went with the 6 feet, as you know, that really predicated against keeping schools open, and everything went to virtual.
Yeah, couldn't do it.
But Tony is right. Tony is right that those recommendations came out of groups of individuals that developed those guidelines in Atlanta. It doesn't mean we're a monolithic group that somehow the director of CDC, which I was, can basically dictate what the entire agency does. I did object. I thought 3 feet was based on reasonable
But it came out of the CDC.
Came out of the CDC.
All right. So, Congressman, do you think there's any chance that, like, we can finish with Fauci and start focusing on China and why they won't let us in, and start getting into what we learned about the vaccine and when, and long COVID and what may be potentially long vax? The things that are actually making people sick right now, and get just done with Fauci? There's no proof that he was on the take. There's no proof that he was trying to do something nefarious. When do we get to move on?
Well, I hope once again, we get back to my main point, which is Fauci was part of one thing, and that is that the government got to dictate what we did. And government overreach is exactly the thing that I've been raging against since I got to Congress. And it doesn't matter if we're going to talk about any conspiracy. You can talk about the COVID, or you can talk about climate change. You can talk about a war. Any excuse the government has to grow in its size and its scope and its control of your life is what's being used. And that's been used by Marxist governments, by fascist governments, by governments that just basically spend too much and take control of our lives. That's not the American government the way I've known it, the one that I swore to defend and serve.
Well,
and I think that's one thing we want to Fauci. When you talk about moving on, no, but he did. He was the senior policy maker. He was the most well-paid, the most listened to. He was a senior advisor on policy, and that's what he advocated. So we do have to address that. But more to your point, when we talk about the World Health Organization, which, of course, was in cahoots with China, who helped cover up the origins, who helped now trying to dictate what we do in America, that is extremely invasive, just like an international criminal court. Anything that's international that's going to try to impose on America's right to self-governance, that's just the next level above what we're already having problems with in our American government. The ultimate minority is the individual, and I want to protect that not only from the American government, but from any world government or organization.
Yes. That's why I'm saying, I got to believe that there has to be something after this that doesn't involve Congress. I think you should be involved, and I think there are other men and women who have credentials beyond just trying to get some social media clips that can be talking about these things. But I just can't help thinking that Fauci's a boogeyman. You want to go after the policies, haul in Biden's chief of staff, haul in Trump's chief of staff, because they're the ones who made the calls on Fauci's recommendation, sure, but he wasn't elected. He's not where the buck stops. They don't want to have that conversation, and you know why, because they both think they're going to get stink on them. And I think they're bigger conversations. I got to jump, but you're always welcome here, Doctor, to come on. Last word to you, Congressman.
Hey, just check out the clip and see what Fauci said in his own words and how I challenged that, because that was his reach to basically control people's lives. And he said it in his own words. Just check out the clip from today's hearing. Thanks.
Yeah, I will. And Congressman, I appreciate you doing the job. I believe you're doing it in good faith. Bob Redfield, you are a tremendous asset to the audience in helping us understand what's going on. You're dealing with long COVID in your practice now. You're seeing it burst in all kinds of directions, and we're not talking about it, and it's a mistake. You're always welcome here to do so. Bob, be well. I'll talk to you again soon. Dr. Redfield, thank you very much. Gentlemen, be well. 4 minutes and 5 seconds. I'm telling you, there's real questions. People are getting sick. COVID is going nowhere. Long COVID is going to keep affecting people in ways that we don't even know yet. Well, how can you say that? Because they're seeing it in their practices. Things that they can't figure out an explanation for, then they go back and start looking for spike protein. Now they start to understand it. Why isn't our government working on that? Last week, we saw history. We had a former president, convicted of a crime. 34 felonies in what really at best was a misdemeanor situation. Now, we're seeing it again because nobody has high ground in the game. It's all gotcha. The son of a sitting president. Another history move. Standing trial for lying on an application to purchase a gun. He says he was an addict. He says this. He says that. Do we see cases like this very commonly? I say no. Let's debate. You guys crack me up. I'm getting all these messages. You seem a little worked up about this. I am. What happened during the pandemic still matters. If for no other reason, you have people who are still getting sick. You have real COVID problems. You have real vaccine issues. And now we just see more of this fakeness, this game. Last week, everybody was upset because Trump was convicted. He was convicted for what he certainly did, but what he did was not enough of a deal for a felony criminal trial. This week, it's Hunter Biden, and suddenly everything changes. You just flip the R&D, and you get all the same arguments. Now all the outrage is on the left. This isn't fair. This is only because of who he is. And now on the right, well, law and order. You know, we got to, we break the rule, do the crime, do the time. It's all so obvious and ugly. This is why I hate the party politics game. Hunter Biden is facing 3 federal gun charges. A jury seated this afternoon. They're coming after him. Prosecutors are accusing him about lying about his drug use when he purchased a gun in 2018 and owning a gun while addicted to crack cocaine. He's looking at 25 years in prison for doing what addicts do. Now, we're going to debate it, but I'm telling you, you look for cases like this, you're going to be looking for a while, okay? Unlike in Trump's case, Hunter Biden had a lot more of the women in his family showing up. But again, it wasn't like this case is embarrassing for the women in his life, right? But you had the first lady there, Jill Biden, you had Hunter's sister, Ashley. His father, the president, issued a statement supporting him, saying, I'm the president, but I'm also a dad. Jill and I love our son. We're so proud of the man he is today. A lot of families have loved ones who have overcome addiction and know what we mean. As the president, I don't and won't comment on pending federal cases, but as a dad, I have boundless love for my son, confidence in him, and respect for his strength. Let's bring in criminal defense attorney and adjunct professor at Cornell Law School, Randy Zillen, and NewsNation's correspondent at large, Geraldo Rivera. First of all, thank you both, gentlemen. It's always good to see you. Randy, appreciate you doing this for me. Randy, I'm not impressed by the case, man. Especially when you're dealing with a guy who was a known addict at the time. I feel they're running around all over the place, and I don't see him being prosecuted like this. Tell me I'm wrong or tell me I'm right, and why.
You're both. What's going to happen is he will be convicted at the trial court level because the case is as easy as it was for the Trump case. But at the appellate court level, we see courts doing it right now. They are saying the Second Amendment does not come with conditions. And if you were once a drug addict, that doesn't mean you don't have a right to bear arms, whether you like guns or you don't like them.
But he lied.
Parallels between he lied, but he may not have lied because it is a status crime. We don't prosecute people for being drug addicts. And that's the difference. Now, does he have to testify to say, I didn't think I was an addict when I filled out the form. I was at a rehab. I was fine. He'll have to testify to say that. But at trial court, he's dead. Appellate court, he's vindicated. It's unconstitutional. Same with Trump.
One more beat, Randy, then I want to go to the big man. Have you ever seen cases like this?
No. In neither event, nobody gets prosecuted for filling out that form to get a gun without using the gun illegally. Same way nobody gets prosecuted for making a false entry in books and records to shut someone up from blabbing that you slept with them.
My producer just said in my ear that the DOJ brought 300 cases exactly like this. So they brought 300 cases from people who were drug addicts, Ben, who then filled out the form and said they weren't addicts, and they busted them for it. That's what you're telling me? Or they brought out?
Been thrown out. 2 of them have already been thrown out.
Okay. No, my producer is qualifying himself now. This is why I want to slap this kid every time I see him. Geraldo, look, isn't this just more playing politics for advantage?
Before you feel too sorry for Hunter Biden, though, this is a sloppy, selfish, self-indulgent, whoremongering, a junkie. He may have been sober for a minute when he bought the gun. I don't know. That is a defense. But Randy's absolutely right. The only time you ever see a prosecution on this charge is, I don't know always, but most often, the prosecution on this charge is when you buy the gun with, illegal statement, then you go out and you use the gun. It's only because you use the gun that the feds are interested in you, and then they prosecute you for it. Just buying the gun, lying to buy the gun. And this guy, his head was up his ass. He didn't know what the hell he was doing. He was buying crack the next day. He was, he really, the only thing that he has nice parents. Otherwise, I have no sympathy for Hunter Biden whatsoever. I don't like special prosecutors. David Weiss has been around since the Trump era. He couldn't get a case against this. They had a deal last year. It would have been a perfectly appropriate deal, no jail time. The guy, says he's sorry and walks. Instead, you have this show trial tomorrow. Right. And they're going to read from his memoir, and then I was with this hooker, and then I was with this one, and on the hood of the car, and then here and there, and I was shooting up and buying this, and you'll get your jollies, and that'll be it.
Eerie. The parallels are so eerie.
Go ahead, Randy. Tell the
Daniels over there, Stormy Daniels with Trump, the laptop with Hunter. You had Trump, feds don't want him. Bragg didn't want him. You had the Fed sweetheart deal for Hunter. Now you have an indictment with Trump where he didn't even know what the other crime was. And with Hunter Biden, again, 2 circuit courts have already thrown out the identical case, which is you can have a gun, and being a drug addict doesn't mean that you can't have a gun. And we saw with Trump, he couldn't have the FEC chair testify. Hunter Biden can't have a doctor testify concerning his brain at the time he filled out the application. Trump and Biden need to go on a speaking tour together.
I got to tell
what
you,
I find fascinating, Chris.
Go ahead, tell me.
No, just what I find fascinating is that you have the Second Amendment people who usually are on the opposite side from the Bidens, opposite ideological gap from the Bidens. Here you have the Second Amendment people. If they are true to themselves,
they're not going to say a thing.
I'm sure are. They have to recognize that Hunter Biden has the same rights as any card-carrying Republican or conservative.
No way. You're way too savvy. You're way too savvy because this isn't about court. Well, maybe not, Randy, but that's not what it's about. It's about the court of public opinion. This is just the game. They want to stick it to Hunter Biden, and they I'm not step for step with you, Geraldo, even though let me tell you something. Geraldo has done some of the best, most compassionate reporting about addiction I've ever seen in my life. It was what made me want to get into long-form work covering addiction that I did at 2020, the show that he helped define many years after him. But I do have a lot of sympathy for addicts. Addicts do crazy, bad things all the time. And I see them as almost possessed by a disease. So I have a level of compassion and sympathy that others may not. That's fine. But let's just be honest. This guy's not named Hunter Biden. You never see this case. You never hear about this case. If it's not Donald Trump, you never see that case. You never hear that case. So
never, ever.
For all the people who are believing they're different, you're full of it. And for all these people who are believing one side is better than the other, you're full of it. You both stink.
Gentlemen,
thank you for making the obvious points. And Randy, I appreciate you because you're much smarter, so people have to understand that they may not like the points, but they better respect where they're coming from because you know what you're talking about. And Geraldo,
love being on with you. Thank you.
I appreciate you both. Geraldo, I just want people to see you. Look at that. Look at the mustache. Look at the hair with the sweep. I mean,
once a junkie, always a junkie. I'm sad to say.
I can't be on with him. It's not fair.
Listen, Geraldo, you're right. But I'm just saying that, we're getting a little... there's a little bit too much judgment of addiction as if it were behavior and a morality play as opposed to an illness. And that's where, for me, it's like once someone's a junkie, once they're an addict, morality, behavior goes out the window, man. They're not lucky if they even remember what they do. And you can show all the pictures of the guy you want with the blunt and embarrass him and all that. I can show you mothers, fathers, priests, rabbis, good people, rich people, all with the exact same picture. Because once you're in the grip of the drug, that's all you are. All right, I got to jump. Gentlemen, Thank you both. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Breaking today, the Gilgo Beach serial killings. You got to remember how paralyzing the fear was in this part of the country about these unsolved murders. And now Rex Heuermann may be the key to closure. Another murder is being pinned to him, a 5th victim. Remember, there's several others still out there. So why are they doing it now? Remember that extensive search at his house last week? The medical examiner was even there? Now there's a charge. Why? Next. Make sure that we get the facts straight about those ATF forms. My producer, Ben, said the DOJ did bring several hundred cases for fraudulent applications. Right. But do they bring cases where a drug addict, states or misstates their addiction in the process of getting the weapon? Now, they don't index them that way, but I'll tell you what, if you search like I did when they first brought this case, you find none. When you talk to former ATF agents who did the job and you tell them this, they kind of like shake their head about it. Like, what do you see what I'm saying? That's the reality. They're only bringing this because of who he is. It's exactly what they complained about last week. That's the game. See it and leave the parties. Now, breaking news in the Gilgo Beach serial killings. Rex Heuermann has another body connected to him now, a fifth murder. He has officially been charged with the murder of 4 victims. Okay, you had Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, Amber Lynn Costello, and Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Okay, but remember, 11 different bodies or parts thereof found in the Gilgo Beach area, 2010, 2011. It created a real fear in this part of the country. Similar victim profiles to the Gilgo 4. There were people who the suggestion was that they had been sex workers, and that's what made them vulnerable. In April, law enforcement opened a new search in the woods of Manorville, New York, 45 minutes from Gilgo Beach, 45 minutes from where I live. The bodies of Valerie Mack, Jessica Taylor, found 20 years ago. 2 weeks ago, law enforcement conducts a second search at Heuermann's residence on Long Island. Very rare, because they dug that place up the first time, literally. Even the ME showed up this second time. So why? Let's bring in retired FBI profiler Jim Clemente. Investigated this case back in 2011. Good to see you, handsome. Once again, you can echo this. This became part of the mythology of this part of the country, and now they seem to be solving these. What's your read on this attachment of another body in this big search and what it could mean going forward?
Well, Chris, as you know, during the initial search, there was literally thousands of sources of forensic evidence from that home and from the beach and from the woods. So I think they're constantly, thoroughly going through that. And when they get a match or when they get an indication that there may be more evidence, that's why they did the search warrant at the house again.
Jim, help me be fair about this. When you dig up a house the first time like the way they did, then you go and dig it up again a second time? Is that unusual? What triggers that?
Well, it is unusual, but it could very well be that some of the forensic evidence that the medical examiner found, for example, it could be knife marks, it could be the marks from tool marks that were used to dismember these bodies. Sorry for being so graphic, but basically they could be going back to look for the tools that were used to make those marks. They can match them one to one.
Does it make sense to you as a profiler that Heuermann could be connected to Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack, dismembered, both of them, bodies found in parts in different places? Both were sex workers like the Gilgo 4, even though the other bodies weren't necessarily seen to have been dismembered. Does this make sense to a profiler?
Yeah, well, dismemberment sometimes can be part of the MO and signature, but it could also be a practical move. In other words, at that point, he may not have been able to transport the whole body or to the place where he wanted to. In other words, he may have gone to a secondary location, let's say in the woods, but didn't want, knowing that people also often get found in the woods, didn't want them to be identifiable. So then later, when he had the opportunity, he took those body parts to the other location where they were a little bit better concealed.
Now, you guys are very lucky at home that we got Jim Clemente on tonight, not just because he's good looking, but he knows the history of this case. And there's a very weird twist in this case that we told you about early on. But one of the reasons that there were no answers early on is that when the FBI wanted to get involved in this case and really take it on, the then police chief didn't want them involved, and the suggestion was because he thought they were looking at him. and he had some little dirty deeds of his own, allegedly, that he didn't want to come up. Now, Rex Heuermann's lawyer is saying, I'll tell you who killed Jessica and the other one, the chief. And he's saying to the FBI, let's look at him again. Do you think that's a ruse?
Well, I mean, obviously it is. I think, defense attorneys will do whatever they can to muddy the waters. But he's saying that the chief's antics may have let the real killer get away years ago. In fact, maybe that's true. But the real killer is Rex Heuermann. And all the evidence points to that, allegedly, at this point. He hasn't been convicted yet. Mm-hmm. But all the evidence points to that. And for the defense attorney to try to reach that far, it really says that he realizes the case against Rex is pretty strong.
Do you believe there will be more bodies connected to this man? Oh, you don't hear me, Jim? Boy, it's a great cliffhanger. All right.
I hear you now.
I'll see you next time.
Sorry.
Oh, you hear me now? Do you think they're going to connect more bodies to him?
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate
the ritualistic behavior sticks to all of them. Thank you.
Very good. All right. We'll keep the story going then. Thank you very much, Jimmy. Appreciate you. Sorry for the technical problems. 3 minutes, 45 seconds. When we come back, Anna Knezevic. Good for you for caring about this story, by the way. Not many did. Disappears without a trace in South Florida, 4 months. Now presumed dead. Her husband, David, said, hey, I was in Serbia. All this police work was done, putting together a case that, he was in Serbia, but not the whole time. But her remains have not been recovered. And did you hear how he was acting in court at his arraignment today? Very weird, no matter what his involvement is. We're going to take you through that. And I got some reporting for you that nobody else has about what this may have been about. I'm going to break it for you next. Okay, it's been 4 months since 40-year-old Miami resident Anna Knezevic went missing. No trace. She had moved to Madrid, trying to process and move on from a difficult divorce. Her estranged husband and business partner. Why am I saying it twice? I'll tell you in a second. He was charged today with kidnapping, not murder. Why? In large part, because they don't want to overreach when they don't have a body. There was a suggestion today that they were saying, Anna, please come forward. Please come forward, the defense was suggesting. That is some really ghoulish stuff. Today, the suspect appeared in court. His lawyer asked for more time. She said she was waiting for arrangements to be made, a nicer way of saying she hadn't been paid yet. Now, the husband is saying he's broke. I don't know that that's true. These two owned a lot of property together, expensive property in South Florida. His demeanor was also weird. I don't care how you feel about your ex. The idea of laughing and smiling when she's missing and presumed dead, whether he had something to do with it or not, and his family just a few feet away, disgusted by this, heartbroken by this. David's going to be back in court next Monday. That was the delay they asked for because I guess she wants to set up making sure she gets her retainer, whatever. Now, there's new video that's emerged of Spanish authorities and the FBI continuing their search for Anna's body and piecing together exactly what David could have done to her. But I have the coffin daffer here to talk about the next two steps that need to happen in this investigation. One, she's going to discuss with us right now. The second one, she doesn't know, but it's reporting that I have that nobody else has about what the motive may be in this case. Retired FBI agent, NewsNation Law and Justice contributor Jennifer Coffindaffer. Good to see you, Coffindaffer. So something I didn't know, they have the ability, Jen, to look at a vehicle and get data that allows them to understand where it went so they can search all those locations for Anna?
Absolutely. This is going to be great information. They have GPS on them, obviously, because often vehicles are stolen. So this is technology that is in most rental cars so that they can track the rental cars. And this is going to be great when they get it. Obviously, they have to get a warrant for that. They're working on that. I still believe the reason they've pinpointed this area where they're searching and where they've sent 7 FBI agents to come help is gleaned from probably his cell phone, where it stopped in that vicinity, and that's why they're looking there.
My understanding is, and please correct it if wrong, that the data they can get, I don't understand why it would be different or better, but they say that the data they can get from the car is better than from the cell phone. How? Aren't they both using cell pings?
Yes, but I think it will be better. And because they have a better tracking system specifically for that car, I think they're going to know exactly where it pulled over. I agree with you that the cell phone should also have good information, but I'm not that familiar with Madrid tower systems. But I guarantee you those rental car agencies are going to have the proper instrumentation to keep track of their cars.
You know, as much as it's hard for the family and, you know, xenophobic Americans to think that it would be better off in Europe to do this investigation, their cell technology is very sophisticated in Europe, specifically in Spain. So maybe they will get a better read than what we would expect here. Now, help me with this one. This is great that the FBI is involved, because my suggestion is, based on the reporting I have, that the motive here was money. They owned properties together, 15, 17, and some other businesses. South Florida, we're talking, double-digit millions worth of property. I have been looking into the amount of leverage on these buildings. Now, you remember that part of the sticking point with the two was, fine, let's get divorced. Let's just split everything 50-50. And he was like, no. We were told, we're not splitting it 50-50. He has some funky leverage on some of these buildings, Jennifer, which is right up the FBI's alley. Second mortgages on things that they supposedly sold, millions of dollars pulled out of these buildings in his name alone. And what does that mean to an FBI investigator?
Oh, that looks like to me he was doing a whole bunch of trickery far in advance of this crime, and it just shows me premeditation, that he was looking to get out of this completely and make sure that he had all the money he could possibly acquire.
Now, this is exactly what the FBI does, right? If I'm able to get it, just by pulling records of the deeds, this is what they do, right? And they really should be on the hustle to lock up what kind of money this guy's, what did he pull out? How did he do the transactions? Did he move any money around? Did anybody else help move money? This could get more expansive, couldn't it?
It could. It could get expansive. Right now, he's facing that federal kidnapping charge, which has a lot of teeth, Chris. But also there could be some fraud charges in this, depending on what he was doing with that money. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see if we see some follow-up white-collar type crime charges come out of this.
I think I'm going to get more reporting, but I think that's exactly where it's going. And when I get it, I'll pass it by you first. Jennifer Coffindaffer, thank you very much. Let's take a break. We'll be right back.